Temperatures. We ask that you be with us as we study your word here this morning, that you would illuminate your scriptures, and ask that you would be with the pastor as he delivers the sermon later this afternoon, and also as we have our concert today, Lord. And we ask that you would bless all these things in your name. Amen. All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that concert. You guys too?
Got some good report last night.
Yeah?
I understand it was really, really good.
Do they take requests?
Possibly. I
Possibly?
think if you write them on a $100 bill, they do.
Yeah? Yeah. I was curious to see if they knew any Johnny Cash songs or anything like that. So they don't know. They don't do any Johnny Cash songs. Johnny Cash?
Boo.
Oh man. We're gonna have to change the topic of our conversation this morning, obviously. Yeah, yeah. Well, Johnny Cash sung a lot of gospel. He did. Okay. What's that? Yeah, yeah.
Mama Carter. Set that straight.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Anyway, back to the real stuff here. We are in chapter 17 of the book of Revelation. We're getting mighty close to the end here, folks. Did we do our homework? Yes. Yeah? Some? All right. What was the homework?
Are you asking to try to remember, or are you on it?
Oh, I know what it is. Yeah. Daniel, yep. So we're gonna reference Daniel quite a bit this morning. So we are talking about the doom of Babylon here in chapter 17. Chapter 17 is addressing a religious system, and then as we move into chapter 18, that's going to be talking about an economic system or a political system. But here we're talking about this religious system. And remember, we had the harlot who came in sitting on many waters. She persecuted Christians. She represents apostasy. And she came in riding on the beast. So she has she's not the beast, but she's associated with the beast. And that's what we're really going to talk about this morning. So we'll start off by reading. I'm going to read chapter 17, verses 9 through 11. Remember, John saw all of these things, was showed by this angel, one of the ones that had the bowl of wrath. And John was amazed. And the angel said, "Why do you wonder? I'm going to tell you the mystery." So that's what we're going to find out today, is what the mystery is. So we're going to start in verse 9 and read through 11. This is the angel speaking. "Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, the other one is, and the other one has not yet come. When he comes, he must remain a little while. The beast which was and was not, and is himself also an 8th, and is one of the 7. And he goes to destruction." That's the end of verse 11. We'll get to the horns later. So we're talking about the beasts. So this angel is going to describe this beast first, and then he'll discuss the woman, the harlot. We remember reading Revelation chapter 13 and Revelation chapter 12, right? We talked a lot about the beast in chapter 12 and 13. It's the same beast. So the beast has 7 heads. And again, many commentators will differ as to the meaning of this. Some say this is a representation of Rome and the Roman Empire. Throughout history, Rome has been described as the city of 7 hills. So is this Rome that we're talking about here? What are your thoughts? For those of you that have done your homework. Rome has been described as a city of seven hills, but I don't think we're specifically talking about Rome here. I think Rome is one of the heads, but throughout history, especially in the Bible, mountains have been a reference to kings or kingdoms. The Old Testament term mountain is used to describe a kingdom or a dominion. So if we were to reference Psalm 30 verse 7, King David used the term mountain in this way. So he's talking about a mountain or his kingdom. Isaiah also will use the same reference. So we'll note that the woman is not a kingdom or an empire. We see that this woman is a form of religious apostasy, riding the power of the beast throughout the kingdoms of history. So this religious system of apostasy is not just present in the end here. It's all been throughout time. So, any comments on that?
Just my commentary, like, it thinks that Rome is. It says this is a tremendous text. It locates geographically the final world power block and headquarters for the world church as well. Historically speaking, Rome is the only city situated on seven hills. The names there are seven peaks are Aventine, a bunch of names I can't pronounce. Sicily, Capitoline, Esquiline, Palatine, Quirino, and Viminal. This is my commentary. There's no disputing fact. The world church sitting on these seven hills, heading up scores of denominations, rides to the power on the back of the tin-horn Western Federation of Nations.
Yes.
That was my commentary.
I think that Rome is a piece of the puzzle. I think that Rome is one of the heads. I don't think this is representative. The seven heads are not Rome, in my opinion. And if we reference verse 9 here, it says the seven heads are seven mountains on which the woman sits. And Rome is a central hub of religious apostasy. I agree with that. But if we continue on to verse 10, it says, and they are seven kings. Five have fallen. So five of the kings have fallen, or kingdoms or empires. Five have fallen. One is, and the other is not yet come. And then the beast is going to be an eighth.
Mine says the seven great world empires are Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome.
Yes.
And that of the Antichrist.
Yes. So five are fallen, one is, and one is yet to come. So obviously the Roman Empire was the mountain or the kingdom that John had a first-hand witness to. So when John says one is, he's talking about the Roman Empire, right? So what are the previous five? And you just mentioned them. We have Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece. These are the five that are fallen. Then Rome is the sixth. That's the one that John is living through and seeing. And then number 7 will arise, a revived Roman Empire, if you will, in the final days. So, and then the beast will be an eighth kingdom on his own. Yes, sir.
Kind of what I got out of that, Rome's the sixth. The Antichrist empire is not yet come. That's coming.
It's coming.
And he's disappears and then he comes back again. That makes the eighth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Daniel, and this is where our homework comes in, Daniel also makes mention of these world kingdoms as well. We've talked a lot about Daniel throughout our study here, but how does Daniel make reference to these world empires? The book of Daniel outlines these kingdoms in 2 different chapters. The first one is Daniel chapter 2. So let's all turn to Daniel chapter 2. Now remember King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. He forgot about his dream, but it troubled him greatly. So he demanded that his magicians, or his wise men, tell him his dream and also provide the interpretation of this dream, right? Of course, they couldn't do this. So here comes Daniel, enter Daniel. Daniel's God, which also happens to be our God, is able to do the impossible, isn't he? So I have a little point of reflection here. I think it's always important that whenever we're studying the Bible, we have these little points of reflection. Isn't it amazing what a man or woman of God is able to do when they have the Lord with them? Isn't that amazing? Look at Daniel. He's just a prisoner in a foreign country, got swept away. Look at how God is using him. It's pretty amazing if you just pause and think about it for a little bit. It's pretty amazing. So anyway, Daniel begins his interpretation of King Nebuchadnezzar's dream in chapter 2 in verse 31. So I'll just read a section of it here. It's going to be a lengthy section. And this is Daniel speaking. It says, "You, O king, were looking, and behold, there was a single great statue. That statue was large and of extraordinary splendor, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was awesome. The head of that statue was made of fine gold, its breast and its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partially of clay, partially of iron. And you continued looking until a stone was cut out without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet, and feet of iron and of clay, and crushed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed all at the same time and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we tell you its interpretation before the king. You, O king, are the King of kings, to whom God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power and the strength and the glory. And wherever the sons of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of the sky, he has given them to your hand for you to rule all over them. You are the head of gold." Pretty interesting, isn't it? Same beast here. MacArthur had an interesting note on this as well. Let me keep reading here, verses 39 through 43. "After you there will arise another kingdom inferior to you, and another kingdom of bronze, which will rule over the earth. There will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So like iron that breaks into pieces, it will crush and break these into pieces. In that you saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. They will be divided, a divided kingdom, but it will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. As to the toes of the feet, they were partly of iron and partly of potter clay. So the kingdom will be strong, and part of it will be mixed and brittle." So MacArthur had a good note on the 10 toes. It says the 10 toes represent the same kings as the 10 horns that we're going to look at in chapter 7 of Daniel. They will rule in the final time of the Gentile empire, which Christ destroys in the violent abruptness at his second coming. Interesting. What you got, Major?
Nothing, I go along with what you're saying there. I just feel like what it says here, there's been five, right then, in this particular time, there's 5 empires that come up and 5 empires that go, and
Mm-hmm.
you're 6th and you're 7th. And to me, it kind of breaks how these empires come and how Christ broke it down when he was carved out of the stone.
Yep.
That's what I kind of think maybe he's talking about there.
Yeah.
And smash the ankle, well, anytime you smash an ankle on a statue, that booger's gonna fall.
Mm-hmm. And we read verses 44 and 45. Did we read those? In those days, the kingdom of heaven will be set up, and it will never be destroyed. That kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all of these kingdoms, but in itself it will endure forever. That's the stone. That's the millennial kingdom. So all of these things that we're reading here in Daniel are precisely where we're at here in the book of Revelation. Yeah? The last days, all right. So King Nebuchadnezzar is not the only one to have a dream either. In Daniel chapter 7, Daniel has a dream about 4 beasts. This is another lengthy chapter, or lengthy passage here. I'll just read a couple of verses. Starting in verse 1 through 3. The 4 beasts representing the same empires as the image in chapter 2. So in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed. And he wrote the dream down and related the following summary of it. So this is Daniel's vision that he's seeing. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up a great sea, and 4 beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. So again, these are the 4 beasts, and each one's different. Verse 4. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle, and I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. A human mind was also given to it. So this is Babylon. Remember, we read about Babylon chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar. He is Babylon. Verse 5. And behold, another beast, a second one resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, Arise and devour much meat. This is Persia. Verse 6. After this I kept looking, and another one, like a bird, the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I kept looking into the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast. Dreadful and terrifying, extremely strong, had large iron teeth, and it devoured and crushed down the remainder with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts before, and it had 10 horns. There's those 10 horns again. So we have the leopard beast that's greased, and then we have verse 7. It's a beast like any other. This is a Roman Empire. This is the one that John lived in. This Roman Empire will be revived in the end days and return to great strength. It's going to be comprised of 10 sub-kingdoms, the 10 horns, which are also the 10 toes in chapter 2. Did I lose everybody? All right. Verse 8 of chapter 7. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up from them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it, and behold, this horn possessed eyes like a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. This other horn is representative of the Antichrist and his rule. Okay. So we also have chapter 7 here, it keeps on going, starting in verse 9, essentially through verse 14. I won't read those whole sections there. But it talks about the Ancient of Days reigning, and the Son of Man is presented. This is where we're at in the book of Revelation. Yes, sir.
The book of Daniel, you want another home study, the book of Daniel from 7 to chapter 12 really gives you a lot of good information and of what's going on in the end times here in Revelation.
Yeah, absolutely. These verses here, verses 9 through 14, really are pointing out to where we're at currently in the book of Revelation. So, those are important. We just finished up all of the bowls of wrath, the judgment of God. The next thing that happens on earth is chapter 19, verse 11. That's the next action that happens here on earth, and that's the return of the Son of Man. And here we have the Son of Man presented in Daniel chapter 7, coming right up. So Daniel gets an interpretation of these beasts, of this vision. Daniel is very alarmed by this. But these four beasts, as we break down the vision again, and it talks about these four different empires. So, pretty interesting stuff, isn't it? Any comments on the book of Daniel?
Well, isn't that the prophecy of Revelation?
Mm-hmm. Really is.
So it was said in the old times before New Testament was ever written.
Yep. Let's read Daniel chapter 7, verse 25 real quick. And this is talking about that horn, the Antichrist. Chapter 7, verse 25. And he will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the Highest One. And he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for times and a half a time. So this is a reference to the 3.5 years, the second half of the 7-year period of the Antichrist power. Again, back to Daniel, we can reference chapter 9, verse 27, seeing when that Antichrist is really going to take power. But this is the second half of the tribulation period. So
as you think about these ruling kings or nations, probably kings, I guess, it appears to be a stair step where, as this progresses, each will bring something to the situation, and then the next one will supersede that and add something else, and finally we get to the Antichrist. So does that not picture a degree of progressiveness, and also the fact that it's not going to just be so blatant all at once, that this is going to kind of be an easy blending in to where it makes more sense that people will be attracted to and follow? I mean, if you accept a little bit,
right,
then here comes the next one, and he adds just a little bit more, and then the next one adds a little bit more, and all of a sudden the Antichrist, and you've already found yourself moved from where you should be to a position to where you ought not be, but the next step will be much easier to fall into. I mean,
right.
So look at our world today, and long conversation, long discussion, I'm sure could be had, but a little bit that we allow, okay, all right, we can live with that.
Right.
Well, so if we've done that, then if we allow just a little bit more, that won't hurt anything. I like to use the example of a plumb bob. If you're building something and it has to be straight, vertical especially, then the plumb bob is the true up and down. So if you move that plumb bob, or you move your building just a little bit, you can probably compensate. I mean, shoot, in carpentry, you know, they make wedges and
Mhm.
caulk and things. Anything that paint will cover, why, seems to be okay.
Yes, caulking will cover a multitude of construction sins.
So, but look where you're at by the time you're done.
Yeah, yeah.
To me, these are world empires, and each one gets a little bit better.
Better?
No, better to the one that don't believe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it gets more fascinating to the people as they go along.
Right.
They rise and they fall.
Right. And we need to, let's bring this back to the book of Revelation now, because we see this harlot, or the prostitute, she just doesn't show up at the end of the book of Revelation.
She represents all of these.
She's riding the beast with the 7 heads. So that prostitute of false religion, has been since the beginning of time. So John, as we look at chapter 17, chapter 18, John is not just giving us a little window into the end. He's giving us a snapshot of all of history, all of time. So this prostitute has been here the whole time. She's here now. She's apostasy, false religion.
Example, United States was set up as the world are on under God.
Mm-hmm.
All come from God. Look what we got away from.
Yeah. It's very true.
Right here in the right field.
Yeah. And our beast in chapter 17 has 7 heads. And Daniel's beast, or the vision of King Nebuchadnezzar, only had 4. So what's up with that? What's the discrepancy in the number? So Daniel is looking forward. He's not looking back. Daniel's just strictly looking forward. And that's where we get where he's at in Babylon, forward to the end. Whereas John is giving us a picture of all of history. So when we have Egypt and Assyria, Daniel's not necessarily looking at those 2 beasts. He's strictly looking forward. So that's why in the book of Daniel we have 4, and in the book of Revelation we have 7. Does that make sense? So John's looking back. He's giving us a snapshot of history. So the harlot's riding the beast all through time, 7 heads, 7 kingdoms. But there's only 4 kingdoms in Daniel, right? So Daniel isn't looking backwards in time. Egypt would be history to Daniel. Assyria would be history to Daniel. He's not looking backwards. He's only looking forward. So.
Daniel prophesied in the Old Testament. John's testifying, he's prophesying in the New Testament.
Yes.
Where the change is at.
Yeah, Daniel's giving us where he's standing forward. John's just giving us, hey, this is what's happened through the course of history. And oh, by the way, as we bring
Plus
this...
what's coming on.
Right. Then as we bring this back to the book of Daniel, we see that the beast in verse 11, let me get to my notes. Let's read verse 11 again. We're back to Revelation now, chapter 17, verse 11. The beast, which was and is not and is himself also an 8th, which is one of the 7, he goes to destruction. So this beast arises from the 7th kingdom and is the 8th. So he is the beast. He's a world empire at the end of tribulation. So what we're seeing here is the final form of Gentile world power in alliance with the apostate religious system, which is symbolized by the harlot. That's really what we're seeing here.
That's right at the end of the millennium, correct? That's the end of the millennium when Christ lets Satan back out.
Mhm.
This is where is and was not. He was, he is, and he isn't. I don't know how to word all that
Yeah.
without reading it. But he comes back and he's for a short time, and that makes the 8th
Yeah.
out of the 7.
That is one view of it. I have a different view on was and is not and is. And this is just my opinion. I don't necessarily, not the authority on this for sure. I think as we read about the beast in chapter 12 and chapter 11, you know, Satan's an imitator. Satan will imitate what God has done. So we read about the beast with the fatal wound. I think he's going to receive a fatal wound, and Satan is going to revive him back. And that is where really the second half of the tribulation is going to take place. I think if we go back to Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, he seats himself in the temple, and we could see that in Revelation 2. And I think this is where that second half period really kicks off as Satan imitates what God has done, and he steps into power. He steps into the temple and seats himself there as God.
That's when he breaks the promise.
Yes, it breaks the treaty with Israel. We see the treaty in Israel as the first of the scrolls. And as he steps in here, that's my opinion of was and is not and is. That's what I think it is. I could be totally wrong. I don't know. That's just my opinion. And that's where this 8th kingdom shows up. And as we read about the horns, we're running out of time here. These 10 horns are going to give power to the beast. And to me, this is really where the beast seats himself as God. So, again, just my opinion. Questions, comments, concerns? There's a lot in there, isn't there? That's some heavy duty stuff. Okay, well, we will kick this off again next time. We'll pick up in verse 12, 17 verse 12, and this is going to be talking about those 10 horns. Good stuff, 10 horns. So that's your homework, is to research the 10 horns. What is it?